I remember the exact moment it happened. Not with noise, not with chaos, just silence. I was in the middle of a crowd, but it felt like I had disappeared. People moved, talked, laughed, and I just stood there, empty, numb. And then it hit me. I didn't care anymore. Not in the hopeless way, but in the freeing way. The kind of apathy that doesn't come from weakness. It comes from strength. For years, I had lived my life on a leash, tugged by opinions, pulled by expectations. What would they think if I failed? What would they say if I spoke my truth? So I stayed quiet, I stayed polite, I stayed in line. But that day, something inside me cracked. No, not cracked, shattered. Why do we care so much? Why do we let strangers, people who don't know our soul, write the rules we live by? Who taught us that acceptance matters more than authenticity? I realized something that changed everything. Every time I cared about their judgment, I handed them power. Every time I tried to please them, I betrayed myself. I was tired of censoring my thoughts, tired of curating my existence, tired of living for applause that never came. So I stopped. I stopped chasing approval. I stopped shrinking my light to make others comfortable. I stopped apologizing for being real, and for the first time, I felt alive. Terrified, yes, but alive. Because freedom isn't peaceful. It's raw. It's the silence after a scream. It's the emptiness before the rebirth. That was the day I stopped caring. And that was the day I won. We like to think we're free, that we make our own choices, form our own opinions, live life on our terms. But that's a lie, one of the oldest ones in history. For as long as humanity has walked in groups, there's been one silent force that rules us. Perception, what people see, what they think they see, what we want them to see, and worst of all, what we fear they might say. It didn't start with social media. It started centuries ago, in grand arenas where bloodshed was masked as entertainment. The Roman Colosseum wasn't just about gladiators, it was about distraction. Keep the people fed, keep them entertained, keep them from asking real questions. Because questioning meant power, and power in the hands of the crowd is always dangerous. Fast forward, Middle Ages. The Inquisition didn't just burn books, it burned minds. If you didn't conform, you were a heretic. If you didn't believe what they told you to, you were silenced, or worse. People didn't question the narrative. They couldn't afford to. Not when their survival depended on being accepted. Then came the wars. And with them, a new kind of weapon, propaganda. In Nazi Germany, conformity wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. Posters didn't say, "Do what's right." They said, "What will the neighbors think?" Fear of judgment became law. And when the fear is strong enough, you don't need chains to control people. Their minds will do it for you. But the most insidious transformation came not from tyrants, but from thinkers. Edward Bernays, nephew of Freud, the man who took the subconscious and sold it to corporations. He understood something terrifying. You don't have to convince people. You just have to influence what they care about. He didn't call it propaganda. He called it public relations. A cleaner word, a prettier lie. And from that lie, an entire world was built. One where branding is truth. One where image is everything. One where how you're perceived matters more than who you are. Now, we scroll through curated lives. We filter our faces, our thoughts, our existence. We judge, we compare, we measure our worth in likes, in views, in validation. And we call this progress. But if everyone is watching you, if every move is calculated, if every thought is filtered through a lens of fear, are you even real anymore? Are you living your life? Or just performing it? They don't need cages anymore. They built a digital panopticon, a prison where the bars are invisible, where you're free to move, but not free to be. And here's the paradox. The more you try to be accepted, the more you lose yourself. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've been edited, trimmed, down, polished into something safe, predictable, marketable. You didn't grow, you conformed. And conformity is not peace, it's quiet desperation. That's why the day you stop caring, truly stop caring, is the day you break the spell. It's the moment you stop performing and start existing, not as a projection, but as a person. And in that moment, for the first time, you are free. They tell us it's natural, that we need to feel accepted, that seeking approval is part of being human. But what if that need was designed? What if we've been conditioned to crave validation like a drug? And what if the high is killing us slowly? Think about it. When you were a child, you were rewarded for behaving, smiles when you followed the rules, praise when you stayed quiet. Punishment, not always physical but emotional, when you strayed too far, and so you learned to adapt, to blend in, to shrink parts of yourself for love, for safety, for belonging. It doesn't stop in childhood, it just evolves. Likes replace gold stars, followers replace friends, and suddenly we're adults still chasing approval, still looking over our shoulders, still asking, was that okay? Did they like it? Did I do it right? You see, validation triggers the same pathways in the brain as addictive substances. Dopamine surges every time someone likes your post, every time they nod in agreement, every time they say, you're doing great. And like all addicts, we start to depend on it. But what's the cost? We stop saying what we mean. We stop asking what we want. We start shaping our personalities for applause. Psychologists call it social comparison theory. We measure our worth by comparing ourselves to others. And most of the time, we come up short. Not because we're not enough, but because we're comparing our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. Maslow talked about self-actualization, becoming who you truly are. But here's the tragedy. Most people never get there because the need to belong keeps them stuck right between acceptance and truth. And then there's Pavlov. Remember him? He rang a bell, gave the dog food, repeated it. Eventually the dog salivated at just the sound of the bell. No food necessary. That's us now. We react to cues, notifications, pings, comments, likes. We perform for the reward, even when the reward is hollow, even when the applause is fake. But the scariest part, most of us don't know we're doing it. We think we're just being nice, or keeping the peace, or staying on brand. But really, we're imprisoned by a need to be liked, a need to be seen, a need to be enough. And here's the twist. You were already enough, but you forgot. Because the world taught you to measure your value with numbers and nods and approval you never needed. So what happens when you stop seeking it? You stop living on a leash. You stop second-guessing every word. You stop apologizing for existing. You don't become careless. You become free. Not the freedom they sell you on billboards, but the real kind, the kind that lives in your bones, the kind that whispers, "I don't need your permission to be me." And that's when the prison door disappears. Not because you broke out, but because you realized it was never locked to begin with. There's a moment so subtle, you almost miss it, when you stop recognizing the person in the mirror. Not because your face has changed, but because your soul has. You've been bending for so long, you didn't notice when you started breaking. And the saddest part, you thought you were doing the right thing. You said yes when you meant no. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You stayed quiet just to avoid the tension. You performed, adjusted, edited, until you were nothing but echoes of everyone else's expectations. All for what? To keep the peace, to be liked, to be seen as good, kind, successful, desirable. You traded authenticity for applause. And the applause never came, or maybe it did. But it didn't feel like you thought it would, because deep down, you knew. They weren't clapping for you. They were clapping for the mask you wore, and every cheer felt like a lie. You start to resent the very people you tried to please, not because they asked too much, but because you gave too much. You gave away your opinions, your boundaries, your truth, one compromise at a time, until there's nothing left but burnout and bitterness. You wake up tired, not just physically, but spiritually, like your soul has been running a marathon with no finish line. And still, you keep going, because you've built a life around the performance. You've decorated the prison walls. You've convinced yourself this is what love looks like. This is what success feels like. But then comes the breaking point. Not loud, not explosive, just a whisper. A quiet, devastating thought. I don't know who I am anymore. And that's when it begins. The unraveling, the peeling back of layers, the terrifying, beautiful process of unbecoming everything you're not. You start saying no. You start asking questions. You start setting boundaries, even if your voice shakes and people notice. Some don't like it. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. And they're right. You have. Because you finally realized pleasing everyone was the fastest way to lose yourself. But choosing yourself, that's how you start to live. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no parade, no sudden burst of light, just a shift, a quiet seismic shift inside you. It begins the day you stop asking, do they approve of me? And start asking, do I approve of myself? Radical self-acceptance. It sounds simple, but it's the most rebellious thing you can do in a world built on insecurity. Because accepting yourself means you stop buying what they're selling. The edits, the filters, the fixes, the endless ways they convince you you're not enough. You begin to see it all for what it is. Noise. A distraction from the truth you've always known but buried. There's nothing wrong with you. There never was. You stop comparing your path to someone else's. You stop shrinking your joy to fit someone else's comfort. You stop needing to be understood by people who were never capable of seeing you. And in that space, the space where the masks come off, where the pretending ends, you meet someone you haven't seen in a long time. You, flawed, messy, honest, and somehow more powerful than ever. You start speaking your mind, not to provoke, but because your truth matters. You say no without guilt. You rest without shame. You pursue what makes your soul come alive, even if no one claps. That's the liberation they never taught you. Not freedom from rules, but freedom from the need to perform. You'll lose people, that's guaranteed. But you'll gain something. Greater peace, clarity, a spine, a voice. You realize that authenticity doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being real. Especially when it's uncomfortable, and you no longer beg for love. You embody it. You no longer chase respect, you command it. Not through force, but through presence. That's the shift, the quiet revolution, where you stop living as a reflection of who they wanted you to be, and start living as the architect of your own mind. That's not just self-love, that's liberation. We've been sold a lie so ingrained in our minds, it's hard to even recognize it anymore. That lie is simple. You need to care what others think, but why? Why does society insist that our worth is measured by the opinions of others? Why do we bend, twist, and shape ourselves to fit a mold that was never ours to begin with? Because it's the perfect way to control people. Not through chains or force, but through something far more powerful, the fear of judgment. This isn't new. It's just evolved. In ancient times, rulers controlled through brute force, armies, taxes, punishment. But today, the tools are more subtle, more insidious, and the power is more invisible than ever before. It's in every notification you receive, in every like, every comment, every follower. It's in every carefully crafted image you project, and every moment you hide yourself for approval. It's in the way we obsess over status, appearances, and validation. This is modern-day slavery. Not to an emperor or dictator, but to the ever-watchful gaze of society. And here's the kicker. We've been taught to love our chains. We believe that this system, the constant need to care, is normal. That it's healthy to be liked, to be accepted. We've been conditioned to believe that our worth is a transaction. You give a piece of yourself, your authenticity, your truth, and in return, you get approval, attention, comfort. But comfort is the enemy of growth, and approval is the enemy of freedom. The truth is, this cycle is a tool of manipulation. It keeps us distracted, obsessed with the surface level, while the real battles take place beneath the surface. It keeps us chasing after empty promises of success and happiness, when real fulfillment is found in owning who we are, not in fitting the mold, but in breaking it. Take a moment to think about it. Who benefits from this system of validation? Who gains from our obsession with approval? Who profits when we care more about the opinions of strangers than our own beliefs? The answer is simple. Those who control the narrative. Those who sell the illusion of perfection. Those who profit from our insecurities. This system isn't about creating better people. It's about creating better consumers. It's about keeping us hooked on a cycle of validation, where we never ask the hard questions, where we never stop to wonder. Why are we constantly seeking approval? When we stop caring about their opinions, we break free. We expose the fraud. We refuse to play by the rules. And that's when the real power shifts. Because true freedom isn't about rejecting the world. It's about rejecting the idea that your worth is tied to anyone else's perception. It's about looking in the mirror and realizing you are enough. Not because they say so, but because you say so. That's when you win. And that's the moment you break the chains of modern-day slavery. In the noise of the world, it's easy to lose yourself. Voices from every direction, social media, family, friends, the media, all screaming for your attention, telling you who to be, what to want, how to live. But here's the truth. You will never find clarity by drowning in the noise. You can't hear your own voice if you're too busy listening to everyone else's. There's a certain kind of strength in solitude. It's not loneliness. It's space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to simply be without the constant pull of external validation. And here's where most people go wrong. They fear isolation. They think being alone means they're failing, that they're missing out on life. But what if isolation isn't the enemy? What if it's the antidote? The moment you step away from the noise, whether it's a weekend retreat in nature or simply turning off your phone for a few hours, you begin to hear what's been lost in the chaos. Your own thoughts, your own needs, your own desires. In that space, you start to understand who you really are, not who the world says you should be, not who your family or friends or society demands you be, but who you are at your core, stripped of the labels, the expectations and the judgment. There's a power that comes from being comfortable in your own company. It's the power of self-sufficiency, of knowing that you are enough even in silence, even in solitude. And in that silence, you find the kind of clarity that doesn't come from external noise. You see your life not through the lens of others' expectations, but through your own understanding of who you are and what you want. Clarity comes not from answering the questions others ask you, but from asking the questions that only you can answer. What do I value? What do I want? What does my happiness look like, not for anyone else, but for me? Isolation isn't a prison, it's a sanctuary. A place where you can strip away the layers of noise and really look at yourself, not in judgment, but in understanding. And once you have that clarity, once you understand who you are, You stop seeking validation outside of yourself. You stop worrying about what they think, because you found a truth that's so solid, so unshakable, that no external opinion can ever make you doubt it again. Embrace isolation, not as a punishment, but as a tool for self-discovery, because only in the quiet can you hear your true voice, and only in the quiet can you truly be free. And once you find that clarity, there's no turning back. You'll never again chase the fleeting approval of others, because you'll know that your own approval is all you need. And that, in itself, is the ultimate form of freedom. There's something powerful about returning to the world after a period of silence. It's not like you're coming back as the same person you were before. You've changed. And the change isn't always visible to the eye, but it's undeniable. You see, when you stop caring about what others think, you stop performing. You stop bending to their expectations, stop chasing their approval, and the world begins to feel different. It's not louder, it's quieter. Not because the noise outside has stopped, but because the noise inside you has calmed down. You walk into rooms with your head held a little higher, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you finally notice yourself. You feel less pressure to impress, less urgency to fit in, because you've learned that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. And that's when the real strength shows up. It's the strength of someone who's unshaken, unbothered. It's the strength of someone who doesn't need external validation to feel worthy, who can walk through life with confidence, not arrogance. A quiet confidence. People notice. They sense it, even if they don't understand it. They see you and realize that you're not swayed by their opinions. You're not trying to fit into their mold, and it makes them uncomfortable, because most people are still chasing approval. They're still trying to measure up, and they'll project their insecurities onto you. But you've moved past that. You've stopped trying to please, and that's your power. You become a mirror, reflecting back to others what they don't even know they're missing. Self-acceptance, freedom, peace, and some people won't get it. They'll criticize you for being too quiet, or for not participating in the endless game of validation. They'll try to pull you back into the noise. But here's the thing, you're not bothered. Because you've learned the most important lesson. You don't need the world to approve of you. You don't need the applause, the followers, the likes. You just need you. The return is not about coming back to a world that expects you to play by its rules. It's about walking through that world on your own terms, stronger, quieter, unbothered, and that's when you realize you've already won. Not because you've convinced the world to accept you, but because you've accepted yourself. And there's nothing more powerful than that.